So as I said, I'm Karen Young. I'm on the steering committee of the GPUS, and I'm also active in the Green Party in New York State and New York City. And we're here today to talk about how to chair a committee, which is a really important part of how we get stuff done in the Green Party. Now, I've been involved in a lot of different committees inside and outside the Green Party. I used to work for a group called the Conclave that ran a conference for the radio industry, and I was involved in a lot of committees there. I've also been on some boards of directors where I worked on different committees, strategic planning, events, fundraising. I'm involved in a lot of committees in the Green Party, the fundraising committee, the outreach committee, the accreditation committee. I can't even remember, honestly, all of them. And on the steering committee, we work with all the different committees of GPUS. So I know a lot about, what is happening out there in committee land. Also in, locally, we have committees that do things. So I want to talk a little bit about, first of all, what a good committee looks like and what a bad committee looks like, a committee that's not working. And also talk about why it's important to have strong committees, how they help build a party. And then we're just going to talk a little bit about some of the things that hold us back from having committees be as strong as they could be, and some solutions to those things. Okay? All right, so can either of you guys describe for me a committee that you've been on that has worked well, where you feel like things are happening, things are firing on all cylinders? If you haven't had that experience, that's okay.
Not really.
You have not?
Well, the committees I've been on have been kind of more on the inactive side, or not moving too quickly, or.
Sure, okay. It's normal.
Yeah.
Well, these aren't Green Party committees, and
That's okay.
As part of my job for a nonprofit, I end up having to chair a lot of committees, and some, are more effective than others. And I'd say the most effective ones are where all the members of the committee are focused on what is the particular task at hand. So they're not trying to bring in other agenda that is only tangentially related at best, and potentially completely unrelated.
Completely unrelated, yes.
Yeah.
That's
so just a
certainly
focus
happened.
on what's our task at hand, how are we going to lay out a path to achieve that task or complete that task.
Okay, great. So these, like, you've had experience with committees that are maybe inactive or not doing so much. What's frustrating to you about that? What's making you think, why is it like this?
I guess just not enough people. People have their own time limitations, and but
Okay, not enough people. That's a big one. Not enough time, you said?
yeah, because everyone has their own time schedule. Not everybody can devote as much time as other people. So.
Okay, good. Anything else?
Nothing that comes off the top of my head right now.
Okay, all right. Those are very common problems, which there actually are solutions to. All right. So when you have strong committees, they make things happen, work gets done. When I worked on the Conclave, this conference that I did, we had an annual budget of about $200,000. We had one full-time staff member, but he actually also had a side business that was kind of related, and then we had a part-time staffer who came on just kind of around the time when the conference was most active, like, about 4 to 6 months before it happened. And the rest of the work, and this is a conference of 800 people, it was all done by volunteers. So it really was very committee-driven. And the conference happened every year for 30 years. People had a wonderful time. People left feeling completely energized about the radio business. People made a lot of relationships and stuff. So it really was very successful. So when you're an organization like ours, where you don't have a lot in the way of financial resources, being able to marshal those volunteer resources and making them work in a committee is absolutely critical. I would say it's, you know, if not the top issue that we have in the Green Party, one of the very top issues. Getting people into these groups and getting them to work together effectively. Okay? So we could really help build the party if we could get all these different things going, which obviously isn't just the job of the three of us, but the more people who kind of really have the tools to make this work, the stronger the organization is going to be as a whole. And we always have to be, you know, recruiting leaders and developing leaders, and leadership is one of those things that you can only learn by doing. A lot of books have been written about it, but until you're actually in there trying to make things happen, you're not really going to understand it. All right, good. All right, so I wanted just to tell you about a couple of books that are very helpful in this regard. One of them is called Grassroots and Nonprofit Leadership. And if you were to look at our strategic plan, it has a link to this book. It's not a very long book, and it's out of print, but this wonderful group has made it available on PDF, so you can just like download it and print it. And it has it really is about everything related to leadership. Not just, you know, running meetings or running committees, but mission statements, boards, you know, volunteer recruitment, how you measure your mission and all that kind of stuff. And the other book I want to tell you about is called Do What You Are. You know, it's so hard to get a good cup of coffee around here.
Yeah.
So I don't have as much gas in the tank. All right, have either of you guys ever heard of the Myers-Briggs Type Index? Yes. Can you tell us what it is, just briefly? Do you remember?
Well, I mean,
That's what Do What You Are is about.
on 4 different scales, introvert, extrovert, thinking, feeling, and there's a couple other ones.
Yes. The Myers-Briggs Type Index is used a lot within organizations to help people define their personalities, and it really has a lot to do with your work style, how your personality is constructed. Sorry. So, I mean, leadership is like parenting. Everybody has you bring your personality to it, you bring your value system, and you bring your experience. You know, it's worked for you, not worked with you in life. There's a lot of different ways to succeed, and it's the same way with committee leadership. But it's important for everybody to know what your own personality style and your preferred work style really is, partly because a lot of times it's a source of conflicts among people. So you need to kind of know what these personality styles are to be able to work effectively with people who are not like you. So I really recommend this book, Do What You Are. It puts Myers-Briggs kind of in the context of careers, and it talks about what types of jobs you might like to do, people of your personality type, how you might conduct a job search, how you might work with people who are not like you, you know, and understand where the conflicts arise and stuff. It's a $12 book in paperback. I'm sure you can find it in a lot of libraries. I have found it incredibly helpful. If you're kind of a natural people person, you might not need this so much. I am not. So it's really helped me an awful lot. Do What You Are. Okay? All right. So another thing I think is important to understand about leadership, like parenting, is like nobody's good at everything. Okay? Everybody's got strengths and weaknesses. So the important thing to being successful is understanding your own strengths and how to really use those. And in terms of your weaknesses, when you're part of a team, you want to assemble a team that has people who are strong where you are weak, because then as a group, you can get a lot more done. Okay? Now, I'm sorry, I forgot your name already.
Alan.
Alan.
And Josh.
And Josh. Okay, so Alan had mentioned that on a group he was on that worked really well, is that all the members were focused on the goals of whatever that committee was. One of the most important ways that this happens is that you talk about the mission and you make sure everybody understands what it is. You know, it's in writing, and when everybody comes into the group, you make sure that they've read that, they've understood it, you know, and you need to refer to it all the time. Especially in the Green Party, it seems like people always come in with these different agendas. So it's really important to say, you know, this is what we're doing in this group. If you want to do something completely different, that's great. Go to it. But this is not the place where we're doing that.
Mhm.
And if you're really upfront about that, it's going to weed out a lot of those problems. Okay, and the other thing is you want to know your people and where they can shine, know what they're interested in, and see where you can find that match between that person and that mission. I have some articles that I can share with you later. One of the really good points that they made is, you know, when people choose to do something in their free time, not as part of their job, it leads to what they really like and what they're good at, what they think is fun. So if you talk to people and you just find out a little bit about what they do in their spare time, or what they did in their spare time back in high school or college or whatever it was, well, if you find out that they, you know, used to throw a lot of parties at the fraternity, well, that's a person who likes to do events, you know, that maybe is good at events, and then you can maybe tap them into that area of the committee, and it'll be fun for them. They might not think to tell you, I like to do events, I want to do events. You know, sometimes you have to dig a little bit to find out about that stuff. All right. Not enough people and not enough time, as in the people I have aren't committing the time, okay? What could be a solution, either of you, to not having enough people on your committee? Starts with R.
Recruit.
Recruit! Exactly. Recruit. So, where would we recruit people? How do we recruit people? Any ideas? No. Okay. Are you talking about mostly in your local party? Is it just a very small group of people? Or?
Both locally and nationally, but
Okay. Well, do you have like an email list locally of people who have signed up at your events or who are registered Greens or anything? What state are you in again?
Florida.
Florida, okay. I mean, you've had a party there for quite a long time. What city are you in?
Brooksville. A little bit north of Tampa.
Tampa, okay. That's where Jennifer Sullivan is, right? Yeah, I love Jennifer.
Yeah. It's just a matter of, we have listservs, we have our contact lists, and
Okay, do you have, when you collect information for volunteers, do you ever have like a form they can check out where they can check off their interests?
if we have, I haven't seen it.
Okay,
Maybe
so
we
that's,
haven't. Maybe we have in the past, but it's something we probably should
yeah,
develop.
that's a really good place to start. Where, especially with an online form, you can't always do it with like a sign-up sheet at an event, but on an online form, and your website should always have a very prominent thing where it says join or volunteer, and then there should be a form they can fill out. We have like 4 or 5 things in New York, and it'll say, you know, something like, I'm interested in, I'm interested in working on electoral campaigns, I'm interested in events, fundraising, media work, you know, just a few basic things like that, where people might have skills and interests and they want to work on them. So that's kind of your first pool to recruit people. If they've shown that they have an interest, you know, it's perfectly normal and natural to reach out to them and say, hey, I see that you checked off this form that you're interested in media. We have a media committee. It's meeting at such and such a time. Would you be interested in joining? Now, you can say first, would you like to get together for a cup of coffee or talk on the phone? Ty can tell you a little bit more about it. Sometimes people are more comfortable with that. Sometimes they are ready to come to a meeting, they just need to be invited. Okay?
Mhm.
And then if you are, if you're doing an event or anything, you absolutely should get up at some point in the event and say, hey, we have these committees, and we would love to have people come and help us if you're interested in events. If you're interested in doing issue advocacy, we get together, we go to protest, whatever it is that you're looking for people for, you've got to always be letting people know that you're looking and let them know what you're looking for. This can be risky, but you can always say to people, hey, bring a friend. I think especially with young people, sometimes they're all sort of looking for something to do. Their friends are often interested in the same sort of thing. Maybe they come along and they like the people and they have a skill they can contribute, and they can contribute it. When you're out tabling or leafleting, especially not so much leafleting, but if you're doing a table, sometimes you get into a rather lengthy conversation with somebody, ask them. And there's always a lot of recruitment that goes on here at the national meeting. We do have supposedly 150 members of the national committee, and they should all be serving on national committees. They are not, but sometimes it's because they haven't been asked. They're not all here, but you can certainly, if you're involved in a national committee, your chair should be doing this, but really anybody could be putting out emails or making phone calls. The list of delegates, a lot of them have phone numbers, is on the website. If you're a delegate, you can access it. And you can just recruit people. If you happen to notice, let's say you're, is there a committee that you're on, or nationally?
Nationally, I'm on Eco Action, and I'm also on the Peace Action Committee, but it hasn't been active for a while.
So, if you see somebody posting, you'd have to read the national list, which I know is like the ultimate sacrifice, and we're going to clean it up. But if you notice that somebody's posting an article about a peace issue, or if they're commenting on some kind of peace issue, they're interested. Reach out to them. Mm-hmm. Hey, would you be interested in reviving this Peace Action Committee? Also, there is a liaison in the steering committee for every committee. Mm-hmm. So you could reach out to the steering committee and kind of brainstorm with a person there. Could we get this going again? Eco Action, I know, has certain issues. Mm-hmm. But that's how you can, those are just some of the ways that you can recruit and find more people. Does that make sense?
Oh, yeah.
Okay, good. So, it doesn't just happen, and it absolutely is going to involve, telephone and in person is a lot more effective usually than sending an email. But sometimes you can't send an email, follow up with a phone call. You do need to do a blast email if you're just trying to reach out really broadly, and then you can reach out to more specific people. Sometimes they have a spouse, a partner, a child. We have a lot of family groups in the Green Party. You can just ask people, hey, don't you have a teenage kid? Does he know something about the web? Would he be interested in getting involved? You just never know. Mm-hmm. If you don't ask, you don't get. Does that make sense? Okay, good. Now then, the time commitment is a real bear. There's no question. None of us has enough time to do our Green Party work. Even if we're unemployed, we're probably, we got to spend time out looking for work and, hustling, whatever. And if you do have a job, if you have a family, it's difficult. So one of the things that I think is really important is to get the right people on the committee in the first place. And this can be really hard, but you may have heard the saying, if you want something done, ask a busy person. Because it's the busy people who know how to get things done. There's a lot of people who are kind of lounging around, they're probably not the kind of person who's going to contribute a lot to your committee. Mm-hmm. Although if they're just sort of a untapped resource, diamond in the rough, and nobody's taken the time to find out what they can do, if you could be that person to help them discover themselves, that can be a great person. But it's the busy people who get stuff done, and you can get a small time commitment from a busy person, they'll do a lot more with it, than somebody who spends a lot of time lounging.
Mhm.
Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Okay. And then, I think part of when people don't commit time is when they're not really sure what they should be doing, or what they could be doing. And another issue is often that they don't see anything to be really enthusiastic about. So if you have a lack of structure, or you're not doing any exciting projects, or people, you haven't asked their opinion, or tapped into what their passion is about this subject, a lot of times you're gonna see a lack of engagement, and low energy. So it's really important to have kind of group discussions, brainstorms. What do you think we should be doing? What's the most important thing we should be doing? What's just some off-the-wall ideas for activities we could be engaging in? Because if people have helped develop those ideas, they're going to be a lot more bought in to making them happen. Now there are people, definitely in the Green Party, who have a lot of ideas, just an idea fountain. But when it comes to actually doing something, they don't follow through. So that is a problem. But if you've been clear about the mission, and you've gotten, a few people together at least, and you're talking about what needs to be done, and you get some commitment and buy-in from the people who are there, it's more likely that these things are actually gonna get done. Okay. I think it's also important, and the Green Party really struggles with this, but I think it's really important when you start a committee that you make it clear that there is an expected commitment. Everybody is expected to attend your meetings or your calls. Everybody is expected to take on a task. Hello? Make people report. I mean, this is what I always do on my committees. We're gonna have a go-around, and everybody's gonna report what they got done on the to-do list that they took away from the previous meeting. And if they have to say, oh gosh, I overslept, the dog ate my homework, it's gonna be embarrassing for them. That's okay, Just the fact that knowing that people are gonna report, and hearing 3 people say that they did a lot of stuff, and they're the 4th person, and they have to say the dog ate my homework, I mean, it's a little bit of peer pressure that comes into play. And you really wanna create that culture of a committee that does things. It's hard. But you can do it, with some of these things. Some things work better for some people than others. Some people really care about what other people think, so they really hate that shaming thing. Other people don't care about that so much, but what they really care about is being listened to. And then if they feel listened to, they feel heard, they feel like their ideas are expected, that might be something that gets them off their butt. Everybody's a little bit different. That makes sense? All right. Sometimes when you're in leadership, I mean, it's true that you have to pay the cost to be the boss, and you have to do a little bit more work than the others, especially when it comes to taking notes, sending out reminders, spending a little bit of that extra time with people to see where they're coming from. I do think if somebody is, they're not showing up because they really are having a personal crisis or something, that if you show some kindness, that it will make them more inclined to get back in the saddle, and renew, show that your trust in them was well placed, that they would come back. So that's just kind of a personal call that you have to make. But if somebody's always, sloughing off, especially if they say they're gonna do something and then they don't, you can't have that. You really wanna discourage that. Okay. So, another thing that, this is really the last thing I think I'll say here, where a lot of committees fall down is in terms of a project timeline. It's easy to have a really good idea that you're gonna put on an event, you're gonna put on a forum, you're gonna hold a big rally, you're gonna gonna write a paper about an issue, whatever it might be. But then there's a lot of steps between the idea and the actual, issue paper or whatever it is that you're presenting. And you really have to map that out. You can do that as a team, but somebody really has to map it out, okay? So what I usually do is start with the end in mind. Okay, let's say it's an issue paper. At the end, we have the issue paper. So what are some of the things that we're going to have to do to get this to the point where we can distribute it?
It's like working backwards.
Working backwards, yeah.
Well, draft it, revise the draft.
Very good.
Research would be right at the beginning.
Yes, research would probably be right at the beginning. Gotta get the facts together, and somebody's gotta do the draft. You probably need some kind of design or a production piece. Somebody is gonna find the graphics or whatever to go with it. That can be kind of on a parallel track. Okay, so what is it now? It's July. Let's say we wanted to have the paper done by August 1st. We want to have it printed or up on the website, or be able to do our press release about it or whatever. So the final version would have to be done, I guess, by August 1st, right? So the design people and the production people would probably need to have it, at least a week, maybe 2 weeks ahead of time.
Well,
You'd
we've
have
already
to
missed
talk
that.
to them. Say what?
So we've already missed that deadline.
Yes. Well, maybe we should move this forward. Let's say that we're gonna have the paper done by October 1st. October 1st. So then, let's just say September 15, it's going to, we'd spell this out a little more. We're gonna have the final product in the hands of the designer so that they can finish the design, get the thing laid out, get it to the printer if it needs to be printed. You have to kind of think about what all those steps might be. Then the web person has to have time to put it up on the web. That shouldn't take very long, but who knows? It depends on your situation. Okay, so then the draft, we would probably want to give people, at least 2 or 3 weeks to read the draft, to make suggestions for improvements, to integrate the suggestions, get it to where it finally has to be. So let's just say, for the sake of argument, that would be September 1st. We got Labor Day in there, so we might have to expand that a little bit. The research probably needs to be done, let's just say, a month before the draft has to be finished. Does that make sense? So this really isn't rocket science, but I think a lot of people find it kind of intimidating. But it's absolutely critical. You've got to have deadlines, and you've got to have intermediate deadlines that people have to agree on. If they're going to be involved in this, if they're going to do the research and it has to be done by August 1st, they have to be able to look you in the eye and say, yes, it is now July 25th, and I can get this done by August 1st. If they can't, but if they feel if they had another week they could get it done, then maybe you have to move the whole thing forward.
And it's also, this is implicit there, but it's also important to know who needs to vet it in terms of seeing it and who needs to approve it.
Yes.
Because then there are going to be people who maybe they aren't actually required to sign off and approve it.
But they feel like they should be able to.
Exactly. So.
Yes, that's a very good point. And that's something that you do kind of in your basic structure of the committee. When anybody joins, you explain to them how the decision-making process works. With GPUS committees, there are bylaws for every committee, and it spells that out. And you can change that. The committee can get together and rewrite the bylaws, and it's really, really boring and awful. We just went through it on the outreach committee, and we had a lot of comments from all over the world on how our bylaws should be, because they have to be approved by the national committee. But there were some comments that improved it. So we made some changes, we got it passed, and now, we can go through the process that we've decided is a process that we want. So having the process is one thing, enforcing the process is another thing. And that's something the groups kind of has to agree on. It shouldn't just be the chair always saying, we agreed that only active members would get to vote on this, and that's only people that, have been present for the last 3 meetings or whatever. Everybody should take a role and just kind of agreeing, this is our process, and this is what we built, and, you shouldn't be spending a lot of time arguing about it. And that's certainly an issue. But yeah, you gotta spell that out, and you've gotta, if somebody can't make the meeting, well, then they gotta send their comments via email or something. It's incredibly important to have an end date for comments. It just causes nothing but trouble, when somebody comes in 3 days after it went to the printer, oh my God, you said that the sunflower came from Germany, it actually came from Australia, how could you do such a thing? I'm like, well, you didn't tell us, we let you know it had to be done by X, it wasn't there. If you didn't have that clear, then you're kind of setting yourself up for a lot of agita. People can still complain, but if you can say, look, we sent the email with the timeline, we made it very clear to everybody, comments were due by X. Most people perform better with deadlines. You can always be adding to your timeline, you can always be changing it. It's not necessarily written in stone, but nothing is going to get done if you don't have a timeline. And here we have the item that has to be done, the date. The most important thing is the name, the person or people who are responsible for this. And as a chair, it is absolutely your job to go around the room and say, okay, who is going to do the research? Alan? And you have to make it really clear to people, if it's not clear to them, that if somebody doesn't step up to do these things, they're not going to be done. If we agreed that this was a project that we all thought was really good, then we need to step up and get it done. If we don't have enthusiasm for it anymore, then okay, at some point you might have to say, well, maybe we should just bag this whole thing if nobody wants to do it. What else should we be doing? Sometimes that's what people need to get off their butt and say, well, no, yeah, we do really want to make this paper, so let's do it. Sometimes really maybe the idea has passed its prime, and it's okay to say, okay, we've changed our mind, we're not going to do it anymore, let's do something else. Things change in the world, not being married to a mistake is really important when you're a leader. And another thing that's really important, it can be a real challenge in the Green Party because a lot of people don't really have skills. They may want to create a paper, but they may not know how to use Microsoft Publisher or something that's going to make it possible to really produce a nice looking thing of length. So either we have to find somebody who knows how to do it, or we have to teach somebody to do it. And to me, one of the great values of volunteer work has always been that you can gain skills, and you can gain experience that you can put on your resume. Even though you weren't getting paid for it, this is valuable. And a lot of times, especially if you work for a big company, it's hard to get, permission to do these things that you don't already have listed on your skill set. But everybody can learn stuff.
How do you suggest handling situations where, it's one thing when people know they don't have the skills, and there's a situation where people maybe think they're a really strong writer or think they're very good at design and are wedded to
And they're not.
poor wording or poor design. How do you work at that in a sensitive way?
Right, that's kind of a sticky wicket. One thing that you can do is, before you start the project, have people kind of bring some examples of what they think a strong piece of work is along these lines, and you can talk about what makes it really good. stuff like that. You can have, if you know somebody's a weak writer, but they think they're a great writer, if there's a way you can gently divert them into something else that they do better. Maybe what they really are is a great researcher, and maybe they're really great with the facts, but what they're not so good at is putting the facts in language that people can understand. Respect them for their knowledge on the topic, get them digging up those nuggets, and then it's really great if it's not the chair, if it's somebody else in the group or several other people in the group to talk about the importance of, good writing and how, people have so many things coming at them, and it's really important that it's written in a very clear and understandable way for somebody who's maybe a 6th grade, person and not a graduate student in urban planning. It's a struggle. And we have a lot of weakness in our communications as Greens because of that. At some point, people have to step up and say, no, we want this to really have an impact.
I suppose that for Greens, within my organization, the struggle would be just poor writing in terms of it's just not good, but I suppose for Greens, the
You mean just
challenge
like
is
poor
more
grammar
that
and stuff?
it's just inappropriate for the level of communication you're wanting to get people trying to.
Yeah, I just
write
find a lot of
things that are
times it's
too
like really at a
academic
graduate
or-
level, and it's
Right.
not like political communication, which
Right.
is supposed to be. It has to be very clean, there's gotta be an emotional component, if you look at how the other parties do things, a lot of times, that's what you see.
Sure.
One thing that doesn't work, that we probably all experience, is if somebody does bad writing and you're on a conference call and everybody's ripping it apart, that the grammar's bad and, this sentence is really bad. People can feel really ganged up on and not appreciated and stuff. So sometimes you can, maybe have the comments just go directly to the writer or something like that, or you could meet with them one-on-one and talk about it. The best thing to do, obviously, is just to have the right people with the right skills doing the right piece of the project. And when people don't have good self-awareness, it really is a huge problem. Often if they can hear it from more than one person, in some way, that's helpful. Sometimes though, they can hear it from 100 people, and it's not gonna sink in. It's just not gonna sink in. But if you can find something that they do well and try to get them doing that, then maybe they won't have to, they won't feel like they have to do this other thing. And the final element is just that the whole group has to approve, or some subcommittee of people that you trust has to approve. And if it's really not good, then you just don't approve it. They may be hurt, they may leave, but you won't be putting out a piece of crap. That's the important thing. Putting out a piece of crap to save somebody's feelings is not going to advance the party. And as a leader, you have to be able to make those choices. You can be very loving and warm and kind and all those things, but you really have to keep your eye on the prize, especially with committee work. When you're a candidate, it's more about, bringing everybody together emotionally and having the vision and all that stuff. On a committee, it's about getting the work done, primarily. Does that make sense? All right. So one thing that I wanted to do that I thought might be fun is I have an article that talks about different ways that people disrupt meetings. And I thought we could maybe do a little role play where we have a little meeting and we try to be one of these people. Oh, here it is. My face. All right. We've all experienced this in the Green Party. And probably other places as well. Okay, first of all, we have the bully. Speaks loudly and speaks for softer spoken team members, apparently deciding they're unable to make their points for themselves. They actually say things like, "That's a stupid idea," to somebody whose ideas aren't stupid. And what they recommend in this article that you do with such a person is you feel free to treat this person like the second grader that they're acting like. Jeff, we're listening to Mary right now. If you let him get away with these things, they're only going to get worse. And I think another thing that's very important to do is to do round robins, to call on everybody in a group and let them speak, and don't let somebody else pop up. Oh, that reminds me of the time when I was in the Army. You just have to say, stop, Jeff, it's Mary's turn now. And sometimes you also really have to put time limits on, no more than 2 minutes. Okay, Jeff, we heard from you already. We're not, nobody's gonna speak until the people who haven't spoken yet speak. The second kind of person is called the non sequitur. You know what this is. They need to be heard. They either don't understand or don't care that what they want to talk about has absolutely nothing to do with your meeting.
Good fact.
Thanks. I'm sorry.
It's not a sneeze, but still.
I had a cough drop.
Do you need a glass of water? Can you use a glass of water?
I'm going to get a cough drop. Oh, I have a cold. Maybe I have a cold. Interrupt swiftly. Don't let them go on and on. I know it's hard, and sometimes you might have to yell, because they're very good at just continuing to talk. But interrupt swiftly with, that's an interesting point, let's table that, and move back to our current agenda item. Don't have a time to meeting agenda, then you're inviting this behavior. Yeah, it's really important to have an agenda. You can set it up at the beginning of the meeting. It really saves time if you set it up before the meeting. We're spending 10 minutes on this topic, and 20 minutes on that topic, and 30 minutes on that topic. We're going to be done by 9 p.m., which everybody wants. So, we just don't have time to talk about that right now. The third person is the would-be visionary. This frustrated philosopher has a nasty habit of sending the discussion down a rabbit hole by proposing ideas that sound deep, like, what if we doubled that? But then leave you cringing by the time he's brought them up in his third meeting. Respond with humor, if you can. I'd love it if our revenue doubled too, Steve. Now back to the question of why we lost that account. It just doesn't have any relevance. If you're doing a brainstorm, maybe it does. The fourth one is the constant questioner. This person assumes that asking questions about everything the speaker says makes them sound smart and attentive, not realizing how distracting it is. You can deflect with, we'll be getting to that, and I promise I'll make time in a few minutes for questions. And then the last one, quite prevalent in the Green Party, is the rambler. Occasionally makes good points, but buries each nugget in 10 minutes of fluff. Unless you want your 20-minute meeting to last an hour, get adept at asking nicely, Jan, do you come out for it or against it? Or another such question that cuts to the chase. I tend to get a sharp tone in my voice when I do that. It's best to avoid that if you can, but sometimes you can't. But if you're going to keep people in your committee, you can't subject them to all this shit all the time. You really have to, and it's not just the chair, but I think usually when people see that the chair is serious about doing business and not wasting everybody's time, that they'll support you in doing these things and making sure that everything moves along. Yeah.
Was that something you got off the internet, or was it in a book, that list?
Good question. Good question. There is a website called CBS Money Watch, actually.
Oh.
There used to be a website called BNet that was really good, and then CBS bought it, and BNet specialized in making these kind of articles with these little lists. And just various articles about management and leadership. They're very good, I think. So that's where I got this list.
Okay.
CBS Money Watch. I think it's just cbsmoneywatch.com, or if you Googled that, you would find it. And it's nice because they save these articles for a long time. I knew I had seen this like 6 months ago, and I couldn't find it, and I went back on their website, before this meeting, and I dug it up because I thought this was so useful.
Did it have a title, or?
It's called 5 Personalities That Wreck a Meeting. Yeah, I pretty much read you the whole thing, but it's a good thing to have.
Yeah, thank you.
Sure.
Now, Here's a question. Now, obviously, the types of disruptors that you mentioned can, be found among all different types of people.
Of course.
What counsel would you have, about in terms of dealing with, because you gave really good counsel about how to deal with some of these personality types, but, so let's say as a white male, I think that I have to, when I chair a meeting, I have to be very careful about how I deploy that. There's the power of the chair, and then there's the social power and privilege that I'm bringing to the meeting.
Right.
And then if, say, one of these disruptors might say there'd be a woman and or a person of color. It's important to keep the meeting on track, but there's also important to do so in a way that isn't either inadvertently or explicitly or implicitly.
Or perceived as.
Or being perceived as, regardless of my intent,
Sure.
perception. How, any counsel about that?
Yeah, that is a really sticky wicket. I can tell you, I was in the racial equity workshop that's going on now, and one of the points, I can't remember what they called it, but it was really good. One of the ways that they say white people often, kind of exhibit unconscious racism is that they hold people of color to a lower standard, and they don't, they'll say they agree with them even when they don't, just because of this fear of being perceived as racist or using your white privilege. So I think if you're positioning yourself as a chair who wants to get down to business and wants to make, productive use of everybody's time who has given up their evening or given up their weekend or whatever it is to be here, and that is the context in which you're doing all these things, that I think it's okay. If this person is like a serial disruptor or something, you might want to have a one-on-one conversation with them at some separate time. And, talk about, I value you because, you do X, Y, and Z, and you've got these skills. I'm concerned about how this seems to be happening in the meetings, and it makes the meetings go long, or, just be kind of really specific about the behavior and what is not working for you, and see if you could come up with something that's going to kind of make everybody happy. I know it's not easy, and it's certainly an issue that we have.
No, that's very helpful.
Yeah, and especially, and it's a big problem we have in the parties, that we've allowed kind of a do-nothing, lackadaisical culture to take hold in a lot of places. It's hard to change that. It's a lot easier if when you start your committee or your organization that you make it clear that you're serious and you're going to do business, and this is how you're doing business, and that's it. It's harder to change horses in midstream if somebody's been able to get away with this for months or years and all of a sudden they can't. If you try to do that with your child or your pet, I'm sure you run into some problems, but you just gotta try it. And if you can keep the focus on the work as much as possible, that's what I would do.
Yeah, and I think your point earlier about just being transparent up front about what the expectations are, instead of having the expectations be implicit. Well, that's good.
Yeah, I think that's really important. All right. So, that's basically what I was going to present. Do you want to do some role playing with some of these personality disruptors, or if you just want to call it a day, we can do that too.
I could probably find other things to do, but I'm also game to role play. It's up to you.
You want
I don't know how good I am at role playing, so it's up to you guys.
All right. Well, you could be the chair. You could be trying to run a meeting, and we could try to disrupt you and get you off track. How does
Okay.
that sound?
Okay.
All right. Okay. Good. So, here, I'm going to give you a couple here.
Oh, I get to be one of these.
Yeah, you get to be one of these types here.
Awesome.
Let's see.
Because I dealt with each one of those times.
I'm
in
sure.
different meetings.
I'm sure. Here you can be. Let's see. Here's that. That's the one
I can do that.
right there. Okay, so I'll just sit over here. So, do you want to we could pretend to have an eco-action meeting, is there like a project that you might be working on, or just
Just,
theoretically that you would be working on?
we can pick something pretty common like nuclear power or some,
Okay,
off the top of my head, I can't think what our latest project is, so I'm a little embarrassed to say, but.
okay, well, I can make something up for you if you like.
Okay, okay.
All right, so let's say it's the Eco Action Committee, and let's say that, I know this is something that came up a while ago, that we want to have a presence at the big National Anti-Fracking Rally, and we want to make a banner, and we want to maybe make a handout, and, you know, get some people around the country to show up for the rally. So that's what we're working on today. Okay? All right, so why don't you just kind of call the meeting to order and say what we're going to talk about, and then we'll start a topic. You'll start the discussion.
Okay.
Okay, so go ahead, Mr. Chairman.
Oh, okay, I guess we're ready to start.
No, you have to lay out some of the discussion topics that we're going to talk about here, or start with one.
Okay. Hope we're going to start on fracking, I guess, on fracking.
Yeah.
Okay. I'm sorry, it's not very good. It's,
Would you rather be an interrupter?
I don't know.
If that would, you know, I could be the chair if you'd rather.
Okay.
All right,
let's try
okay,
that.
good. So
I'll try that.
here's some of the interrupters,
Okay.
what they do. So, okay, so guys, I'm glad you could make the Eco Action meeting tonight. And here's a handout with some of the
Okay.
answers. So we've got this anti-fracking rally that's coming up on April 18th. And we had talked about getting a banner together, and we talked about getting a handout together where we're going to explain fracking and the Green Party position. And we also need to come up with a plan for how we're going to turn out some people around the country to join in this Green Party contingent. So why don't we talk first about the handout. We want to have a handout that we can give to people at this rally. What do we think are some of the key points that should be on this handout? Anybody?
Isn't it key that we should be dealing with these NSA revelations? I mean, it's not, I mean, the government is basically spying on us, and we know this now. I mean, just collecting all this data.
You know what,
about
Alan? That is an incredibly important problem. It absolutely is, and we have a thing on the Green Party website about it, but it really isn't relevant to the fracking discussion. So if you want to talk about that in another committee, that's where we do that. Thank you, though. Okay, so the handout. Let's try and come up with maybe 2 or 3 key points that we want to make about fracking and the Green Party position, why people should support the Green Party. Any thoughts?
Will we be printing a handout on recycled paper?
Probably. Okay. All right, so does anybody, is anybody willing to work on this handout? We need to get it done, probably at least get a draft done in the next couple of weeks.
Well, I was watching on HBO the other week, I was watching this Gasland 2 documentary.
Yeah.
And it was just amazing to me, you know, how the devastation is happening because of this fracking and the families it's affecting. And that, I mean, I grew up on the farm in Nebraska, and I just think about, what if, you know, they start fracking in Nebraska, and it's gonna be devastating there. And then I just start thinking about the chipmunks and what's gonna happen to them. And I mean,
Okay,
it's
so
one thing after
you,
another.
Are you saying that maybe we should have a personal story or some personal photos or something from the actual
Well,
people
maybe
who are
about the
affected?
chipmunks or about the other wildlife, or, I mean, did anyone see that documentary or the one before it? You know, Gasland, or?
Sure, and maybe some folks here would like to suggest some points that were made in Gasland or Gasland 2 that should be in the leaflet. But maybe, you know, you can go back and watch the movie, maybe email us some of those points, that would be great. Okay.
That was the Rambler.
Yes. Okay, good. All right, so the handouts. So would you be willing to do that work, Alan?
Yes.
Email us just some key points that were made in Gasland and Gasland 2 that you think could be in the leaflet.
And it's
Maybe.
not, we're not dealing with the NSA revelations.
No,
Okay.
not today.
That's the non sequitur.
Okay, we're doing a little role play here about people that disrupt committee meetings.
Oh,
All right, so we had the handout, and we have to work on the plan to turn people out for the meeting. Let's talk about that for a little while now, okay? So, we have about 10
am I
states.
disrupting by coming late?
Not really.
Oh, okay.
But that is something that often happens.
That is something that
in
often
meetings.
happens, yes, that's true.
Like,
And
It's role playing there.
yeah.
I can't
Let me make a
believe
point about that. I actually think it's very important to start your meetings on time.
Mm.
Like within maybe 5 minutes, give people 5 minutes, not more than 5 minutes, because that just encourages people to be late, penalizes the people who have shown up on time. And it's one of the simple things that you can do to
What
just
about green time?
to communicate to everybody that you mean business, okay? Well, green time is not a time that we honor on my committees. Somebody else can do it. It's got a lot of names, green time. Another thing that happens, if you do conference calls a lot, is people are like driving. Jen loves to do this. She calls in when she's driving. You hear all this traffic noise and everything. Don't hesitate to tell people to put their phone on mute unless they're speaking. *6, they may not know what it is. But that background noise is really distracting. And I would say don't let it go on forever. Sometimes people, you just get a bad connection or something and it creates an echo or something. Tell people to sign off and sign on again. That
Yeah.
often fixes it.
A lot of times they may not even realize that they.
Yeah, sometimes you hear it.
They
in
can
the
hear the
end.
background noise.
Yeah, there's dogs barking, God knows. But it's really disruptive to the whole group when you have all that. Okay, so we were going to talk about the turnout plan for the rally. What we decided we wanted to do was have a big green presence, have a lot of greens from around the country. If they're coming to the rally anyway, that they come and they gather at the green banner. So what do we think needs to be done in order to get people to the rally? Anybody? Well, we've got a bunch of states here that are represented on the committee. Who's willing to call people, like state leaders or people that you know in different states, and find out who's coming to the rally?
I mean, I could start with the list from our local counties, or counties around where I live.
Okay, that would be great. So what can you do to help bring people to the rally?
I could use our lists too, and I could put it out on social media and in a couple websites.
Okay, excellent. Did we run out of interrupters?
Well, I was waiting for him, I finished mine, I was waiting for him to say something really, mildly stupid, and so
Oh, so you could, okay.
so I
you
could bully him, but.
All right,
I'm
so,
kind of lost with how
okay,
to do some of this stuff, so. Because I'm usually the one that stays quiet, so
I see.
it's hard for me to do, I can't think how to do some of these.
Oh, I'm sorry, okay. What have you got there, the questioner?
I had questioner and I had visionary, which I don't know how to do, and I have bully, which I'm too leery about doing.
Okay, well, you could probably be a bully.
What is that?
That doesn't mean, I
Pick
don't
on the
mean.
big guy, make him the bully. They goes down what always happens, they just assume, because we're
And
big
he
guys.
stays
we
crying
must be the
inside.
nastiest.
Oh.
Yeah.
All right, so let's do this. Why don't you tell us, just talk a little bit about what type of people might come to the rally, how you're gonna reach out to people, just anything that comes to mind, just kind of like you just did with a little more detail, and then you can jump on them.
Well, we're expecting people from our green lists, and they might bring some friends of theirs, and.
I mean, have they come in the past, these people, these friends of yours? I mean, you really think that's something you can count on?
It has happened in the past, we have had people bring.
I mean, like,
friends
having
around.
like one person come is not exactly bringing a whole bunch of people.
Okay,
Every
Alan,
person-
that's really not very helpful. and we don't know who's gonna come and who's not gonna come. That's why we have to reach out to a lot of different people. So that's why I kinda wanna hear from everybody about what states you can reach out to, where you know people, who you can call, and when we can get that done by. That's really what we're talking about here. Okay?
Okay. Where was I? With the social media, it spreads it out, and people might share it with their friends or retweet it or however, and get it out to more people.
Okay.
It'll kind of build a little ball and get it rolling.
Okay, that
Do you
sounds
think maybe
good.
we could get 1 million people to this rally? Maybe 2 million?
You know, I think that would be great, Alan, but given that we've never turned out more than like, I'd say 100 people, Greens, to a national rally, that's probably shooting a little
Double
bit
it.
high.
Well, then why bother?
Why bother? You out. No, it's good, it's great to shoot high, it absolutely is. Obviously, everybody ought to be opposed to fracking, it's a terrible thing. There's probably 1 million people just in the states where the actual fracking sites are. But the reality is, you know, with our resources, that's probably not possible. So let's try to set a number, maybe that's ambitious, but that's doable. And we could all sort of work together to make that happen. Okay, good. So did that feel sort of like what happens in meetings sometimes?
Yeah, sometimes, yeah.
So when somebody is quiet, I mean, it's really, it's just so important as a chair, and we don't do this on the steering committee as much as we should, but really to make sure that everybody gets called on. And if you feel like you don't get to say stuff or you get run over, you know, you should have a separate conversation with your chair, you know, one-on-one conversation and say, look, I feel like you never call on me. I feel like I have to compete with other people who are like yelling and, you know, always saying that they have comments. And you could just suggest, can we do like a round robin? It doesn't have to be just about you, you know, if there's other people on the committee that you never hear from, there usually are. There's usually a few people that really dominate, you know, and it's really important for everybody to get their 2 cents in and to feel safe, you know.
And it's easier to retreat when it's a phone call, conference call, than in a face-to-face.
Right,
Yeah.
right, exactly. You don't even know that you're there
Yeah.
sometimes.
It's important to draw those people out because sometimes the quiet people have the key. Sometimes they've been
Absolutely.
sitting and thinking, listening, and then, you know, if you can get them to say something, they may have something that just breaks the logjam or just inspires people. And that's what a facilitator needs to make sure those people are drawn out.
Yeah, absolutely. I think there's 2 pieces to that. There's one, there's controlling the people who want to talk all the time, and then there's drawing out the people that are not talking. Sometimes I find the more you know about that person, the more you can ask them like a real specific question that they'll be able to respond to. You know, like we have a guy at a fundraising committee who has a background in development, but he doesn't always like step forward and give his opinion. So we were talking about some project we were doing and everybody else was blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, so Daniel, you know, in your experience working in development, you know, what do you think the keys are for us to communicate with these particular donors that we're talking about? So he could respond to that specific question without having to kind of respond to some global, so what do you think? You know, sometimes you don't know what you think, but you may know what you think about a specific thing. And I think if people are just afraid of like taking up too much time or space, if you just like kind of refer to what they bring to the table, that kind of helps, especially if they have something nobody else does in the group. I think it's kind of hard because sometimes people, they're shy and they just don't like the idea of, you know, having everyone's attention focused on them and stuff. So.
Yeah, which is what makes me uneasy, so.
Yeah,
I'd be a little bit
and I
nervous.
think
So.
that's pretty normal, especially if people are being like loud and combative and stuff, but sometimes even if they're not.
Yeah.
That's why the NC list is just drives so many people away. 'Cause
Oh, I know.
there's such a small group of people that just dominate everything. And everybody else, can't get
Right.
a word in edgewise.
Well, we're going to fix that. I mean, it's one of our
Yeah, I
top
know.
priorities.
I wrote a proposal about 5 years ago that
Yeah,
got shot down pretty good, is trying to censor everybody. That's what's gonna happen anytime you try to.
well, we have to develop the political will to change it,
Well,
because
maybe
it's just not working
Lennon
for
might be
us.
right, there's a lot of new people.
Yeah.
We'll see.
Right, and there are a lot of people that never post, so you don't know what they think, you
Yeah,
know?
that's the thing, is how you draw those people. They're like the quiet people in the meeting, we gotta figure out ways to draw those people out.
Right, exactly. Sometimes, breaking, you can't do this on a conference call so much, but breaking up into a small group, a lot of people are more comfortable talking in a group of 3 than like standing up in front of a group of 20. It's just more of a little like chat than, I think doing the round robin's really important. And just making sure that you keep track of who hasn't spoken and make sure that you specifically ask them. And sometimes you might want to talk to the loudmouths, offline and say, look, I know that you do a lot of work and you have a lot to say and that's great, but this is a team effort and we really need to make sure that we hear from everybody. So sometimes maybe if you have a thought, if you could just wait and see if anybody else has something to say before you pop your hand up on the stack again, that would be great. I think sometimes people don't realize that they're doing that. And another thing you can do is like, if things are not working on a committee and the chair isn't responding, you can get together with a couple other people on the committee and bring up your issue, either offline or during a call and say, hey, I really think that, we need to be doing X or Y, and make sure you have somebody who can back you up. And Mary will pop up and say, yeah, I agree with him. And then Joe will pop up and say, yeah, absolutely, I agree with him too. And that's much harder for like the chair or the dominant people to ignore. When there's more than one person. So. Well, I think this has been good. I'm really glad you
No,
came.
this was very helpful, thank
Yeah.
you.
You're
Thank you.
welcome. I know a lot of people think this stuff is boring, but
No,
it's
this is very nuts and bolts,
good.
good.
Yeah, I think it's really important. And you can turn things around. Like, it's harder, like I said, than to start from a clean slate and do things right, but it can be done. It really can, and everybody will thank you for it. All right?
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, thanks a lot.
Sorry I was a little better with the.
No problem. Don't worry about it at all. You weren't expecting to be forced to role play. You were really good at that. The Rambler, the Chipmunks. The
Yeah,
NSA, I love that. That so happens,
yeah. All right, have a good day.
All right, you too.
Where's it from? Cafeteria, first floor or something?
Yes.
Sir, registration.
The registration table's right, yeah, it's right down the hall here on the 3rd floor. You should see it. The t-shirts and everything are there. I'm Karen Young, by the way.
First thing, fourth.
Oh, Bruce, nice to
Yeah.
meet you. I had no idea what you looked like.
Yeah, well, look at it.
I'm glad you made it. Thanks for your support on the strategic plan.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of good ideas there. The thing is, you have to have some people who just
I know, but
don't want to change.
I think they're a small number, so it's
Well,
just about
that
getting
was
them
that,
together.
like that proposal last year that I wrote to, basically endorse.
Thank you.
Sure, thank you.
Jill Stein's. campaign.
Yeah, the Green New Deal.
Green New Deal, yeah. I was ready to quit.
Wow.
But people were just, but then Claudia Elquist wrote to me offline, she said, wait for the poll.
Exactly. Yeah, that
And
happens
that
all
may
the
be
time.
the same thing with the strategic plan.